Thank you all for being here. Thank you for inviting us to be here with you and give us an opportunity to share with you why we're running for mayor, what we want to do for Norman, and what we see the future of Norman. I'm Stephen Tyler Holman. I've represented Ward 7 on the City Council for the last 12 years. I grew up in Norman. I'm the fourth generation of my family to call Norman home. Graduated from Norman High in 2004. Spent some time at OU working in the athletic department, and decided in 2011 at 26 years old to run for city council. Got into a runoff election, which I lost by 21 votes, and then decided to stay involved and keep going to city meetings, and ran again 2 years later and won by 28 votes. So I always, every time I talk, I mention that just because it really illustrates how important every single vote is in local elections. Norman has over 130,000 people, and just this past spring, 2 of our city council elections were decided by less than 100 votes. So we represent a growing city and a very diverse city that has rural, suburban, urban, apartments, single-family homes, and a wide variety of different kind of businesses, from Hitachi and Johnson Controls and Avara all the way down to the small locally owned businesses on Main Street. So during my time on council, I've served with 4 different mayors and 36 different council members. There's been a really high turnover rate on the city council, and at a 2-to-1 rate, the majority of my former colleagues on the council did not lose re-election. They chose not to run again for whatever various reasons. And usually after 1 or 2 terms. Only 2 other council members in the last 12 years besides myself have served more than 2 terms on the city council. Robert Castleberry served 3 terms, and Matt Peacock is in his 3rd term. And so for $100 a month and having to make major decisions about toll roads or arenas or dealing with homelessness, it can be a real challenge to sit up there if you have a business, you have a family, and having to miss out on those things while you're being responsible for the operations of the city can be a real challenge for a lot of folks. So I appreciate everybody that's willing to step up and do it, and I look forward to the questions that we'll hear today. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Riley Mullinex. I'm a lifelong Normanite, born and raised, graduated from Norman North and went on to OU undergrad and OU Law School. Been a practicing attorney since 2011, focusing on civil litigation, business law, a little criminal defense, and really passionate about expungements and pardons, helping people get second chances through that. I'm not a politician, and I think that is a good thing in this. I'm coming into this with new eyes, and I'm running because I think I can help unify and collaborate with all sides of the people in Norman to come up with creative solutions to the issues that we face and the issues we face. There are some, but Norman is a great place to live. I think we can make it even better. And so I'm excited for the opportunity to do that, and appreciate the opportunity to speak with y'all this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Larry Heigl, and I join Stephen in thanking you for taking time out of your day to be with us this morning. This is an important race. They all are. It's who do we put in what place, and why do we have to do that? What I bring to the table is a lot of experience. I've lived here in Norman since '78. Been involved in all kinds of groups since that time. Raised children here, went through schools, did all kinds of things like that. Spent 26 years in the Navy. The last part of that was reserve time, and so I also worked at the city of Norman for 17 years. That helped me do a lot of the way that we plan, the way that we do other kinds of things. Also worked for the county for a little while on boards and commissions that they had down there. I was chair of the excise board, and that had a lot to do with budgets. Budget's the biggest of our deals. It's a hard deal. We're trying to figure out where to put money and spend it correctly, and spend it so that you guys have your input into it. I share with a lot of the council members the idea that we need the citizens to come and tell us what they want. Because a lot of times you can't work in a vacuum any more than your customers. You always pay attention to what they want, and that's what you say. That's what we're doing on the other side. It's a difference, I think, between all of us as to are we backward looking or are we forward looking. And what I bring you is a person that is forward looking, that wants things like the arena bill, wants things that help us in regional transit, wants to be able to sit down and improve Norman in some people's opinion. But what we are doing is growing. And when we grow, are we growing intelligently? What are we growing for the next mayor that comes down the pipe? We haven't been zigged too much by past mayors, but I don't want to be the guy that made the mistake and then somebody else has to end up fixing it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Perfect. You everyone hear me okay? So this first question, we're going to start out with just our unhoused and the issues that we're facing as Norman citizens, business owners. What will you do to help the people who don't have homes, and how we make sure that they get the help they need to live safely?
So in Norman, we've definitely seen an increase in visible homelessness. We've seen it increase 18% nationwide, over 20% statewide last year. In Oklahoma City, they saw almost a 30% increase last year. As Norman has continued to grow, we've grown by over 20,000 people in the last decade. And Oklahoma has long been known for having issues with mental health and addiction issues. We're one of the highest ranking states and have been for many years when it comes to those things. And in Norman specifically, we've had Griffin Hospital in our city limits for over 100 years. Griffin is still an operating state institution that houses people from all 77 counties. We also have a county jail in Norman that has over 500 inmates who often are brought to Norman from all over Cleveland County, and there is no coordinated plan for when someone is released from that county jail that they get taken back to the jurisdiction that they're from. We need to be working together with the other partner cities in Cleveland County to make sure that Norman is not having to bear the burden for the entire county, Cleveland County, the third largest county in the state. We need to be working with our nonprofit organizations who are experts and professionals in dealing with mental health care and crisis. Working with our police department, making sure they are trained on how to de-escalate and deal with mental health when they come upon it, and knowing what services that we can connect people to help them get off the streets and into safe, supportive, stable housing or treatment, whichever it may be. The 988 program is a big one that we've supported over the last few years, the national rollout of that, to help relieve the burden on our police department from being the only entity that can respond to these issues. Because often when they have to respond, their options are typically we can arrest them or we can't arrest them. And if they do arrest them, someone who's suffering from a mental health crisis, they can take them to the county jail, but they're only going to be in there for a short amount of time, maybe 48 hours, and then they're going to be released right back out onto the streets of Norman. And so I think we need to make sure that, one, we're preventing people from becoming homeless if we can by expanding affordable housing, reducing regulations that make it more expensive and more difficult to build housing in Norman. And then once people are in that situation, knowing what services we can connect them to that are going to help them get off the street and out of that situation. We all know it is an issue. It's a national issue. It was an issue in the Edmond mayoral debate last night about not as much as we're having in Norman. We're a bigger city, but it's still an issue, and it's impacting big cities and small towns everywhere.
Well, I think it starts with the city being a catalyst and a leader to bring together all these different groups that are have a stake in this, the nonprofits, the faith-based groups, private businesses and individuals, and coming up with outside-the-box solutions to this issue, because it's not an issue that we can ignore. It's not going away. But it's also not one where we can just demonize these people that are our brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers. And so it's going to take as Stephen said, oftentimes these individuals have mental health or substance abuse issues, and what is that stems from is the trauma they've experienced in life. And so it takes a process of helping these people deal with their trauma, and it's a fine line between enabling the situation and actually helping these people. And unfortunately, some of these people do not want help, and that's where I think we have an opportunity to work with the different treatment courts, like the Cleveland County Treatment Court, Judge Tupper, or with the City of Norman Municipal Court, to have a carrot and a stick approach to the situation, where people that don't want help need to be held accountable for their actions, because as everyone knows here, the homeless situation causes a lot of problems for businesses around where the shelter is, and it's you know, I've dealt with this a lot personally, working with a nonprofit my dad started recently, the Oklahoma Phoenix Project, and so it's not a quick fix solution. It's something that we have to think long term, and it is helping these people deal with their underlying traumas that get re-perpetuated every day they're on the streets. And so one of the ideas that we have is what I'm calling Phoenix communities, and so it's on private land where it's a former homeless helping current homeless, and it's a hand up, not a handout, where we help these people take back personal responsibilities for their lives. But again, it's not a quick fix solution, and so it's not something we can ignore. It's something that we need to work on the root cause.
I do not believe that it's a municipal function to house people, to sit down and do mental health. All those did belong to the county at one time, and the county exempted itself last year in the legislature. What that does is it leaves us with a non-sustainable way of draining our budget. It costs a little over $1 million a year. We're paying $740,000 for the shelter and the other costs that go in. What I think needs to happen in this is to encourage those nonprofits that want to work in this field, to encourage them to do the things that they would like to have done. I understand addiction. I understand the other parts that are in there. As Stephen says, we do need to build more houses. That's been one of the problems over the last 10 or 15 years, is we haven't kept the market going with smaller houses. We've been building these large mansions and doing things that are just contrary to the good of the city in that spirit. We need to sit down and have houses that are not necessarily built by the city, but are built by contractors who know what they're doing. The other part that we're not doing now is there's no wraparound services for people. They do exist in town, they are there, but there is no channeling of that person. If I checked into a homeless shelter, would I get access to the mental health things that I need? Would I get access to the physical things that I need, other than food and just a shelter? What I keep on trying to champion is for somebody, maybe Gene McCowan, to come up and build his shelter, do the things that they want to do, have that as an entity outside the city. That's just my thought.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor. So this next question is a touchy one, especially at the federal level with these new departments we have, but municipal spending. How will you spend the city's money wisely to make our community better without wasting it?
What we do when we're thinking about when I'm thinking about how to spend money, everything has to do, to me, with infrastructure and those kinds of things. It also has to do with the arts. Both of us support the idea of expanding Sooner Theater and having the things that they offer those kids. That's another part of education that I kind of get gripey about when one of the first things they do is kill the arts. And you don't do that. That's how children learn music. That's how children learn to draw or not to draw or whatever. It's a way of letting them express themselves. And as a person that's made a living off professionally as an artist, it's hard not to have those kids express themselves and do the things that they want to do. The other things we look at are what do we need to do to maintain what we've got. If we just do new projects and all the rest of that, we're not doing our job correctly, so a lot of things are maintenance. A lot of things come out as to where growth is. Are we promoting growth? I have a very pro-business stance. I want to do things that are good for, right now it's been downtown, but for all business, that allows a business to sit down there and grow, to get the customers in, to be able to do the things that they need to do. If you don't have traffic, you don't have cash flow. That's a bad thing. And so anything that we can do to do that, we've discussed, well, basically a cleanup program downtown. And so when we use the word wisely, I think that's a lot of the conversation about how do we spend money on things that are not infrastructure. And in that, I've already discussed on how I think about spending money for the unhoused. It's not just unhoused in general. It's an argument against the criminals that are working on that group and hurting that group that come in. And it's how do we better protect downtown? To me, that would be cameras. That would be other things that we can do to enhance the police department. A brand new police officer cost me $300,000 first year. That's $150, $120 depending on the years after that. Gotta buy cars, gotta buy all kinds of stuff. Can't help the cost. We need more police officers, but how are we going to get the money to be able to do it? So my thought is some of that needs to be automated, and that'd be a camera, that'd be other kinds of things that we can go in. There are privacy issues that come up in that, but I think when we're on a public street, you don't have an expectation of privacy.
So I've approved 11 city budgets in the last 12 years. Our city budget has grown, our revenue has grown every year. Right now, we've been seeing record sales tax revenue. Last month was our best, on the bar graph, it was our best sales tax revenue month in the last 5 years. And we're pacing about 20% above where we were prior to 2020 levels. But we're also seeing that our expenses, our salaries and benefits, are increasing at a faster rate than our sales tax is growing. We have infrastructure maintenance that is extremely expensive. We have outstanding projects that are voter approved, like 36th Avenue Northwest, that is a $20 million project, and it keeps getting rejected for federal funding every single year. Several of us in this room have traveled to Washington, D.C. before and spoken to our senators and Congress members about this project specifically and trying to get it done to no avail. Many cities like Norman have spent decades developing in a pattern that they're having to go into a lot of debt to do maintenance. If just on our sales tax revenue alone, we would not be able to maintain the infrastructure we currently have. We have multiple voter-approved bond programs, a street maintenance bond, a street enhancement bond, a sewer excise tax, public safety sales tax. We have multiple programs that voters in Norman have approved over the years that help supplement our city's general fund and provide us the ability to do maintenance. I mentioned Edmond before. They had multiple bond issues fail in November. One of them was a street maintenance bond that was modeled after our program that's been very successful. It was first approved in 2006 and has been renewed every 5 years since then. And the percent approval has increased every time because it's such a popular program. But it requires taking out millions of dollars in interest, or paying millions of dollars in interest. Same thing with Norman Forward. Because we are not doing pay-go with Norman Forward, and we wanted to bond, finance the projects up front and get them done quickly, Norman Forward program has almost $30 million in interest attached to it. And I always imagine if we were doing pay-go with Norman Forward, that'd be $30 million of additional funds that we could put towards more projects, or making sure that the projects we've done are being done properly, So municipal budgets are a really big thing. Our budget this past year that was unanimously approved was almost $300 million. Our general fund is about $100 million. But again, most of our expenses, 90% of it is salaries and benefits for city employees. So having enough staffing to keep up and also being able to pay well enough to attract and maintain talent is a real challenge for cities like Norman.
So obviously, working with others on council, working with the different city groups to make sure that we're not spending money frivolously. The big thing is to, with the fact that Norman cities are, most of the revenue comes from sales tax, to acknowledge the fact that it can go down. Right now, we are having a bumper years or whatever, but it could go down, and so it's important to take that into account. But it's also, I think, spending on things that are will have a return on investment, and that's something going back to these food forests that I was talking about. That is something that can really have a return on investment. I don't know how many people in this room understand are familiar with that. It's planting these food forests in public spaces where the return of abundance that can come from doing this based on permaculture principles is unbelievable. I got back from Galt's Landing in Central Florida earlier this month after I'd been there 2 years before, and what the example of what's happened there by planting these fruit trees and bushes is unbelievable. The growth and the abundance of food, and how that would help the city is help the people in the city have more affordable groceries with the rising cost of groceries, help with food security, and aside from that, I would very much be willing to work with others to make sure that we had the best possible outcome when it came to the budget, as far as working up through that.
Norman's got the most high-profile homeless situation that I've seen in any city. What are we gonna do to tone that back a little bit? I don't think it's good for the homeless, it's not good for the city. You understand what I'm trying to say?
As in, like, are there any creative out of the box ways, or
How soon can we
How
move them
direct
off
is
of
it?
Gray Street?
what was it?
How soon can we move them off of Gray Street?
Okay, so that's gonna be moving the shelter.
Whatever you gotta do, but they're too high profile.
So I know we addressed them earlier in that house, but on moving the shelter,
What we've done is we now have a different operator for the shelter. We couldn't shut down the shelter. This is just me talking. I don't want to talk for Stephen. But we couldn't shut down the shelter at the beginning of winter. That's one of the things that we don't want to be cruel. But in March, that contract, that shelter should be moved. It should be closed. It should go somewhere else. But the problem is that you've got those are human beings, and they are subject to whatever the weather is. So we have to have a place to move them to. That's what we keep on arguing about. It's the difference if you like the idea of the city paying for that. If we're trying to keep all the money that we can and use it for the public good, are we spending $1 million on homeless? Is that for the public good? I say no. But what are we gonna do with those people? It would be, there's some churches that have joined in with this conversation. Gene McCowan's got in and he's tried to get property and build a place. The question is if you live on one side of town, you live on the other side of town, which side of town should we put it on? Because it doesn't matter where you put it, you're gonna get shot at. There is no good place to put that. And so I would hope that we could do something. We do have some things like bridges and all the other things that we don't own them. Those are charities to themselves. And they're nonprofit, they're everything else, and they do a great job. There are all kinds of, I think it's 38 some odd different agencies that are here in town that can take care of those problems. But they need to get together to work on that. We have the continuum of care, which sits down and organizes, is supposed to organize all of us. I'm hoping with the new operator, which is called City Care, of the shelter, that they will be able to get that place able to be either moved or disbanded or something. We will by March have an answer to where they're no longer downtown. Another thing that we, in my opinion, have to work on is the idea of, remember Shawnee did you can't lie, you can't sit in certain ways. Something similar to that to make sure downtown stays clear and make sure the business area stays clear. But where are we gonna put them always comes up as a question. And how do we treat them like human beings? That's the other part of the question. We can get into rhetoric all the time, but the thing to remember, at least in my opinion, is that you have to sit down there and do them with people.
So, to understand the current situation with homelessness in Norman, I think you have to understand the history in Norman. Salvation Army opened on North Porter in 1968, operating a shelter and homeless services. Food and Shelter for Friends opened in 1981 in downtown Norman, where the Well currently sits, right behind Neighborhood Jam. And it was there from 1981 until 2017. So there had been a shelter, and if you remember, when you would drive down James Garner Boulevard when Food and Shelter was there, you would always see people sleeping up and down the sidewalk there, and there would be people roaming around downtown. And this is before, 20 years ago when I graduated from Norman High, downtown was not much of anything. There was nothing going on. There were no art walk, there was no music festival, there was no fall fest. There were very few businesses. There was basically the Vista, the Diner, and Coaches. That was it, as far as places I ever went to. And now there is so much activity. There are new businesses opening all the time downtown. But there has been a shelter as part of the downtown area for longer than I've been alive. And before we opened a shelter in the old library on Gray Street, we had businesses, after Food and Shelter for Friends moved to Reed Avenue and built the tiny homes in their new facility, we had businesses coming to the City Hall and saying, why isn't the city doing anything about all these people sleeping up and down the sidewalks on Main Street? And then 2 homeless people froze to death on Main Street in the winter of 2018. And we felt like we've got to do something. We cannot allow this to happen. Oklahoma is one of the most unhospitable places when it comes to the climate to be outside. We have freezing cold in the winter, boiling hot in the summer, and severe weather in the spring and fall. There is never a good time in this state to be living outside. And I would question the mental capacity of anybody that out there that says, I'm choosing to live outside here. Why would they choose here of all places to live outside? It's not friendly for that. And people talk about like Los Angeles. Well, it's 75 degrees in Los Angeles all year round. So of course you would be wanting people would live outside there. But the fact is that without the shelter right now on Gray Street, there would be 50 plus more people out on the streets of downtown Norman every night and in the parks and in the neighborhoods. It's not a solution, it's not solving the problem, but it is helping keep people off the streets and it's helping get people into permanent housing. I think the best location for a shelter is on the Griffin Hospital property next to Food and Shelter and the Cleveland County Health Department and the other services that are right in that area already. Thanks.
What are your views on the TIF and the new arena?
All of them. The TIF and the new arena.
My primary view is I think that people should vote on this expenditure and this commitment, a long-term commitment. I personally would love to see an on-campus arena, and I think there's a lot of support behind that, but I understand why the University North Park area makes sense, and the overwhelming feedback I've heard is just either private investments should do it or let the public vote on this kind of large expenditure and commitment for the next 25 years. So that would be my stance, let the people vote on it, and I'm pretty confident if the people of Norman think it's a good idea and want it, then I think they'll vote yes. And if not, they'll vote no, and then we'll know for sure, once and for all.
I'm generally in favor of a new arena and entertainment district. I hear a lot of concerns about the process of how this has gone about, and so I do also believe that a vote of the people on this is what should occur. But I think there's a lot of alternatives as far as location and financing that's possible, but in general, I'm in favor of a new arena and entertainment district.
I am in favor of it. Obviously, that's what I've been talking about for the last 4 years. It is something that is going to help Norman do what we need to do. We need to be able to make money, and that's with sales tax, and we can do everything we can with sales tax to get it. It has houses on it. The arena is not the answer. The arena is just a building that's the anchor tenant for everything. Having the university there paying, I've forgotten their number, I have to look at my little book, but they're paying rent, and pretty good rent. They're also paying taxes on that. It is a way to build this city into a destination city. There are all kinds of other ideas that went there. We didn't vote, I don't have any problem with people voting on the one way or the other way, but we didn't vote on the other TIFs that we have in town. We're applying rules differently to different things because a couple of professors don't like the idea of the university doing anything. The university's told us that we can no longer use Lloyd Noble Center in the present age. I mean, I use it as a building, but it's 50 years old. And so the technology's not there for the SEC games. It's not there for all kinds of other things. It's not there for recruiting. And Porter's done a great job this year with his ball team. The gymnastics coaches have done a wonderful job. What would be better for them is a new place for those girls and boys to go display their talents and have it here. And we make money on the side. So that's my.
Well, listen, I want to thank you all for coming, and we do appreciate that. And at this time, we will close it out, but I'm going to ask you guys to hang around. Thank you.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Again, David.
I've got it.